Okay. Hope you're okay with. I just started the video while you were having a bite. Sorry about that.
No
Wasn't
worries.
trying to catch you off guard there.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back, friends. We're on part B with Zoe. It's been a very interesting video so far, and like I said, I have some theories. Now I kind of want to try to hone in a little bit more narrow, if I can. Um, and um, the problem is the two types that I think it comes down to are very similar in
Okay.
my head, and that makes it. And you seem right on the line of two different types, so it's hard for me to be definitive. So I'm trying to think of some quirks about those two types that can help me figure it out. So
Okay.
so I might ask you about some weird things.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's see. As the Have you always been needing to be around people every 2 or 3 hours? Has that always been the case, or is that an evolution in you?
Is that an evolution in me?
It is an evolution.
No, I said, is that an
Oh, you're just
evolution?
repeating it. Okay,
Yes. Sorry. Um,
no worries.
how far how far back do you mean always?
What'd you say?
I said, how far back do you mean
Oh,
always?
I don't know, your whole life.
My whole life.
Yeah.
Okay. I gotta dig. I'm not sure. Evolution. I think I generally okay. Yeah. Because I got some old journals from when I was like 8 years old.
Hmm.
I think I generally do have a pretty hard time if I have to be away from people for too long.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
Yep, that's good to know. And so I don't know if you've ever been asked this one. This question is often used to try to identify whether someone's an introvert or an extrovert, but I'm not really thinking of it quite that way. So
yeah.
don't feel like I'm going to draw an
Okay.
immediate conclusion based on what you say.
Yeah.
But if if you're in a social setting, well, I guess this would probably be pre-COVID. I don't know. I don't know like how many social
Yeah.
settings you've been in since COVID started.
Yeah.
Maybe not as many. I know I haven't.
Fortunately.
Right. Well, so pre-COVID, were you often the type that more likely ended up kind of in the midst of the crowd, kind of enjoying the vibes of the crowd, or on the outskirts of the crowd, kind of observing the crowd, or kind of on the outer outskirts, sort of observing the observers in a way?
Observing the observers. I'm not sure if I've done that or not, but that seems like so much fun. um, uh, okay, crowd. So like concerts. I live in Nashville.
Hmm.
I used to go to a lot of concerts. So I'm
Hmm.
trying to think back to that. That's probably the most accurate.
Maybe more like a house party where
Like
you're
a house
expected
party.
to engage with people or whatever, or at least they're. I don't know how many house parties you've been to.
Yeah.
I haven't been to like a ton, but I've been to enough of them, and there's usually like crowds of people, groups of people that are sort of form in different places.
Yeah. Um,
And then just people hanging out on the outskirts.
yeah. There's people hanging out on the outskirts because they they would prefer to have their own conversation, and there's people hanging out on the outskirts because they would prefer to observe the goings on of the greater.
Sure.
Um, okay, and you're trying to make a distinction between those types of people?
I don't know. There's a bunch of different types of people. There's more types of people than I can probably.
True, but is that like the distinction you're referring to?
I guess I'm trying to figure out how close into the crowd you typically enjoy getting.
How close? I like. I definitely don't mind like getting in with the crowd, so I'll do that. Um, you know, but I also like. I think it's really interesting being at, well, especially parties, because sometimes you'll see people like in a more vulnerable state
Mm-hmm.
than they're used to being.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Especially like, so I'm in college, right? It's very academically rigorous. Everyone's got goals ahead of, um, you know, ahead of whatever else, they're pushing down. So then they're like totally different at parties. And I'm like, this is so cool. Like, I don't know. I just want, like, sometimes I want to bring a notebook and just be like, you know, take it all in, just see where it goes.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, like I'll do whatever, I guess. Um, yeah.
Okay, I have a guess on your type, and I guess you'll have to tell me whether or not this is a surprise or uh, how far off you think it is. I guess it's more of a discussion than it is anything. Just to tell
Okay.
you which type, which type of you're giving off the vibes of, in one person's opinion. Um,
Yeah.
so you'll be able to rewatch the video and see that I told you the type that I actually had marked as the type that I thought you were. So you won't have
Okay.
to worry about whether I changed it at the last minute or something like that. So what type? What maybe you have been typed before, or you have taken tests before, or you've thought about it yourself before. So what's the story? What's the story there behind um, what you thought you were, what you do think you are, and so on.
Okay. So my parents are kind of into Myers-Briggs.
Mhm.
And they would talk about like so their organization would do it when I was a kid. And so I think when I was like 11,
Mhm.
I was when I like, what's that called? There's like an effect where you hear something and then you hear it more often. So I was
Yeah.
11 and then it was on my radar.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, yeah. So I took a Myers Briggs test, or it was like, uh, copied and scanned from a book.
Mhm.
And I got ISTJ. And I told my parents, and they're like, no, you're not. Uh, and then they said, you're not an S, you're an N. So I was like,
Mhm.
okay. So then, so I was like, well, then that letter was wrong. So I must be an INTJ. And I like kind of like, there's a lot of like online or wherever, there's a lot of descriptions that are like, they're very strategic and very analytical. And I was like, cool, I'm strategic and analytical.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But like, like you're 12, like I didn't understand it. So then later I typed as INTP in
Mhm.
later high school. Um, I like had a pretty close friend that like we were both kind of learning it about the same time, like 16, and they're like, "Oh, you're definitely a P and not a J." Um, and yeah, then I got to college, and every test I would take would say ENFP. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, or like ENTP.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Okay, so you've
and
gotten a
then
lot of
I was
different
like,
results.
so I was like, yeah. So I was like, yeah, I have no idea. Then about a month ago, I started learning about cognitive functions. So I
Mhm.
really tried to engage with that, try to learn about cognitive functions.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and then so from that, I was like, oh, I must be an INFJ, which was something I had never considered prior. I think in part because they've got a very certain stereotype, and I was like, that's
Yeah.
gross. I yeah. So then I was like, okay, and then someone on the internet told me I was, no, you're not an I, you're an E. So I was like, well, okay. um, I should consider that. So they said I was ENTP. Um,
Oh, interesting.
and every like the logic checked out, but I'm also like, so at this point I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Well, this is going to be interesting because my guess is not any of the ones you've mentioned.
Okay.
And that I don't know. This could be like a new thought or new revelation, or it could just be like uh I don't know. But I'll explain my rationale, and
Okay.
then I'll tell you what I thought it was.
Yeah.
So I don't like, first of all, I don't like to necessarily um, label somebody, or let make a guess as to whether somebody's an introvert or extrovert unless it's very obviously true, um,
Yeah.
or even necessarily how much they want to be around people. That may or may not necessarily mean that you are considered an I or E in the cognitive function sense. So, but more just thinking about extroverts interact with the world first in a way, and
Yeah.
then they go internal. So that could be ideationally, that could be emotionally, or it could be sensory, but the point is the world is the playground, and then the internal is the secondary kind of place. You know what I'm saying? Whereas for introverts, it's sort of like the internal world is the playground and the external world is the place to kind of deal with shit, you know? That's the way I would. That's the way I think about it, anyways. When cognitive functions, at least, all the cognitive
Yeah.
functions are about interfacing with the world, or the external ones, the extroverted ones, are about
Yeah.
interfacing with the world. So that's why I asked if you were proactive or reactive, because reactive people have to have the world sort of to interact with,
Yeah.
to to find their way, so to speak. So that's extroverted people. Extroverted people have to react to the world as it's happening to make their way through it. And introverted people do that on their own, and then they come in and then they engage with the world. So so I was thinking in from the MBTI sense, I was thinking extroverted from early on as well. Uh, well, you said you've gotten some introverted and some extroverted typings. So
Yeah.
I guess let's not compare what my thoughts are, I guess, to the different typings you've gotten, because they've been all very different. Um,
Yeah.
but at least explaining my rationale on that. Um, as far as far as preferring um, sensing to intuition, you know, that's not really where I would have gone. Where I went first, where I went first was trying to think about whether you preferred introverted intuition or extroverted intuition. And to me, it seemed much more like you preferred introverted intuition, just from knowing a lot of people who do, and having learned about a lot of it and things. It's much more um, concerned with the truth and definitiveness, kind of, and is more able to lock in on a truth than extroverted intuition. Extroverted intuition is very non-committal with the truth, in a way,
Yeah.
or at least non-committal with a direction, I guess. Um, so also, your being able to sort of identify with living in the eternal now versus the continuity sort of thing is something an extroverted sensor kind of does, which I do as well, which is I often have this sense that I'm just one slice of a fourth dimensional being at this given moment in time,
Yeah.
and there will be another one of me in the future, and there are many others in the past, you know. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's how extroverted sensors do it, is they sort of just are in that moment right now, and that's why they're so kind of good at sensing, kind of like good at enjoying flavors and enjoying the moment, and enjoying this music right now, or this piece of art right now, or something like that. Um, and so that was what made me think, okay, introverted intuition, extroverted sensing axis, okay. But now, as far as the feeling is concerned, a few things you said were very interesting to me early on. One was that you didn't necessarily spend a lot of time in introspection, but to me you were saying that in a very introverted thinker kind of way. So I was like, well, okay, so maybe you prefer introverted thinking, but maybe not as a higher cognitive function like an INTP or something. But maybe it's lower down the stack. That's where I started thinking INFJ or ENFJ. So
Okay.
then your sort of confusion by your own emotions and your strong sense of understanding of other people's emotions told me NIFE. That's where I was like, okay, if you understand other people's emotions, you're using introverted intuition and extroverted feeling.
Yeah.
So that was what led me down the NISEFETI axes, and I also tried just a few other questions just to see like if there was any extroverted thinking preference. There's not a whole lot of, as far as I can tell, and I'm an INFJ, so I'm just saying like I asked you some questions that I know, like because I know I don't.
Yeah.
I'll pay other people to do that kind of shit for me,
Mhm.
um, or manipulate or bribe or however it has to happen.
Yeah.
um, and also your sense that how you mentioned kind of that you know using the word harmony isn't automatically going to make me go, oh, an extroverted feeler, but saying something like you felt like it was sort of disingenuous is a reality of extroverted feeling. It is inauthentic almost by its nature. And it's not like you
Mhm.
don't care or that you don't really feel things for people, but it's more like extroverted feelers put their own feelings to a degree to the side and focus on the other people's feelings.
Yeah.
And that can be seen as inauthentic or disingenuous because you're not being true to your own feelings in a sense. But extroverted feelers just feel like they're making the better judgment on that. They're just like, well, it's the better judgment for me to care about other people's feelings over my own, you know? So,
I
but
think it
there
can be a pretty poor judgment.
it could be, yeah, if you're letting yourself um, get left behind. And that's a problem that extroverted feelers I've noticed have is a doormat kind of
Yeah.
situation where they let people walk all over them. Um, and because you can find any kind of excuse for the other person, you're like, oh, well, they had a bad day, or they're just everything's going wrong for them or something. That's why they were so bad to me. And the reality is, an introverted feeler perhaps would be like, you need to cut that shit out right now. So that's just how it is, unfortunately, or fortunately. I don't know. It's just a thing. I don't think it's a good or a bad thing. I think it's just a thing. Um, let's see. As far as extroverted intuition or introverted sensing, yeah, just I don't know. I know a lot of people like that, and that doesn't like you don't strike me as an ENFP. I was married to an ENFP, so um, but ENFPs are ENFPs and ENTPs are just very scattered, kind of all over the place, and you have very coherent. And it's not that they're not coherent, but I guess the way is they're playing jazz, and you're when you're talking, you're not necessarily playing jazz in the way that you talk. I think you're pretty definitive in your thoughts. I think you've got your thoughts kind of figured out, and you represent your thoughts, and you do it succinctly and clearly, which is what to me an NFJ type would do. Um, so, um, so I landed on ENFJ. That was where I landed, but INFJ wasn't out of the question actually till the very end. Um, and I don't remember what it was that you said that maybe pushed me over the edge to ENFJ. Um, but I think you probably like being around people a lot more than other INFJs that I know, and myself included. So, I mean, my mom said that when I was in the nursery,
Mm.
I would go off and play by myself. you know, and yeah, other INFJs that I know as well will spend long bouts of time alone and enjoy that, be perfectly fine with that, and spend a lot of time in introspection,
Yeah.
to a fault almost. So that was the other thing that made me think maybe not INFJ, because I think INFJs actually have the problem of being too introspective, and ENFJs are really kind of perceivery in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? If that's a word. Yeah, I do know my daughter's an ENFJ, and I've known other ENFJs, and they really do tend to go with the flow and go with the moment of what's going on, a lot like your kind of stereotypical perceiver types do. But I think that's
Yeah.
just the extroverted feeling. I think that's just being willing to be open to what's going on with the vibe of the room and go with where people want to go, and that might mean you're going with the whim of a perceiver. So you might be swept away in that um, mode kind of with other people because you want to be in sync with them and like ride along their wavelength kind of.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion. So I don't know if that I don't you have to tell me now, back, reflect it back to me.
Yeah.
What do you think about that rationale, I guess?
Well, now that you've said that, like, I think I had an argument with a friend just today where I was like, I don't think I'm introspective, and they're like, you're the most introspective person I know. So that the fact that that word is coming up,
Hmm.
I'm thinking about that. Um, um, yeah, I also like, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough call whether I prefer being around people or not. I've had a decent amount of trauma in the last 4 years too,
Hmm.
which has really skewed it. So I think that has probably made it harder for me to be alone with myself, which is probably
Hmm.
what has skewed your decision and made it such a difficult call. So I now that once you started saying it, I was like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, like I could tell what you were going to say.
Now you could be an
Um,
INFJ.
it makes sense. I don't know.
I mean,
um,
I took a typing test in my early 30s, and I got ENFJ, and that didn't really resonate with me. But I was like, oh, cool. And then a few years later, I took another one. And I got INFJ, and then I read the description. And I felt like somebody had been following me around my whole life, like scrutinizing me without real. And like it said a lot of things
yeah,
about me that I didn't even know that I didn't even think about, and then until I read it. Um, so I guess you have to think. Only you will know the
yeah,
patterns that you've lived with, because only you can remember that stuff,
yeah.
and only you can make that evaluation, because it's not necessarily a scientific instrument. It's more like just a ruler, you know.
I think I had a similar experience reading about the description. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Mhm.
Especially things like, I don't know, what did it say? I saw the word chameleon somewhere. It was like,
Yeah, like social chameleon.
yeah, and also, well, things like they know what they're. Um, there's like a self assurance related to like whatever model is in place. And I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
that makes sense. And I was like,
Yeah.
but no, that's going to be true for any person. Like this is ridiculous.
Well, not necessarily always though. I think if I had to say, like, give an example of a um like there's some people out there like Keanu Reeves who have like a presence, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And then there's other people who are just good at blending in and like being a part of the group, you know. So I do think extroverted feelers are really good at, not to say that introverted feelers can't do it or that they don't do it, because
yeah,
if I understand what you're getting at, which is if you're going to interact with people, you have to bridge. There has to be a bridge somehow.
yeah.
You have to be you have to be you have to change to some degree to talk
Hmm.
to them. Both of you change. Well, that's a Carl
Yeah.
Jung's quote. I think it's like
Is it?
something like, two personalities are like two chemicals. If they come together, then both are changed, or something to that degree. So, yeah, I mean, so would it be fair to say that it's probably one of those two?
Oh, Yes, with what you've described, um, it makes sense to me. I think part of the thing too is like I have been having a lot of trouble with understanding what the distinction is people make between NE and NI, um,
Okay.
which is part of it. So that was why I was between INFJ and ENTP. I don't know if I'm any NI.
Mm-hmm.
With what you've described, so you think NI is in my stack, and that's going to be
I
FE and
I mean,
TI.
I don't think you're like any ENTP I know.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So
So that makes sense. So, and the issue comes down to both of them having the same stacks in different orders. So that makes that would make the most sense in the world. Um,
yeah, and I think what I've noticed is that the uh this is why I still think maybe ENFJ possibly
okay.
is. I think I've noticed, and this is from observing my daughter, who I'm very confident is the ENFJ.
Yeah.
Um, INFJs, I think, to a lot of degree, when they get stuck, will go into their heads and get stuck in a loop, like in a mental loop. And I think I've noticed what ENFJs do when they get stuck, or when there's a problem, or there's uh, some kind of similar thing, is they go to
Yeah.
other people, and that's real. They have to be around some other person, and really have to just somehow interface with that other person. And I think that INFJs and ENFJs are doing a similar thing there, but it's like
Yeah.
the ENFJs are doing it in a reciprocal way with other people, and the INFJs doing it in a reciprocal way, kind of in their own head, you know.
So I think that's what the challenge is that I definitely do like the reciprocal way internally.
Yeah.
Um, but then when it's too great, there is a point at which I cannot rely on that, and I need to do it with other people. But
Mhm.
the thing is, so the point when it exceeds your capacity is more significant because that's when you know I think I have the strongest memories of having to go to other people,
Mhm.
because that's when it's going to be a very like intense conversation, and you're gonna cover a lot of ground very quickly.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I can completely understand um, how it would be between those, and I honestly, yeah,
It might just require, maybe now it's time to go do some reading on those two types, I guess, maybe,
yes. So
and
you think
see.
it's yeah, you think it's more likely ENFJ?
Well, yes, asterisk.
Okay,
The asterisk just being, you mentioned having been through a lot of trauma recently. Um, it's that certainly affects things. That certainly affects, if you are left-handed and you injure your left hand, you're going to start throwing with your right hand or picking up things with your right hand, just out of consequence of like, ow, my left hand hurts. So now
yeah,
I'm doing things that I wouldn't normally have done, and now things are awkward. So if you can get back to if you can whatever manage your trauma, work through the trauma. I've been through a lot of therapy myself.
yeah,
However you have to do it. On the other side of that, you'll probably come out a certain kind of person, and that person who's processed it is probably going to be the closest to your natural state, and
okay,
that type will probably be the one that you probably are, if that's different than what I think you are right now. But there's other things that are just kind of trauma besides a lifetime of thinking a certain way, or you know, when it comes to like NI versus NE, for example, extroverted intuitives are like the open all the windows people, and introverted intuitives are like close all the windows people. Like extroverted intuitives don't like to be boxed in by conclusiveness necessarily, and introverted intuitives prefer it. They prefer to narrow in on things. That's not necessarily something that may change a whole lot necessarily if you get traumatized. That's probably going to indicate how you deal with the trauma. you know an introverted intuitive
yeah.
might deal with it this way, and an extroverted intuitive might deal with the trauma that way. So um So that's just how I think. That's how I think about it.
Yeah.
Less from the standpoint of the malleable parts of you, which of there, everybody has like malleable parts. But there's also some immutable part of you, to some degree, because you've managed to remember everything since you can start remembering things. Um,
Yeah.
so somehow some part of you has remained continuous. Um, I've thought about this a lot, and it's a
Yeah.
weird thought, right? Like that there's this part of me that's continuous, and there's this other part that's malleable.
It's
Um,
discontinuous. Yeah.
so understanding the continuous part kind of is, I guess, the challenge here, because the malleable part's just going to keep being malleable, and it'll just keep changing, and you'll be a different person in 5 years than you are now.
Yeah.
So, anyways, you'll have to leave a comment in the comments on this video if you reach some level of conclusiveness on it,
Okay.
or some other insight. I mean, if you feel like sharing that kind of thing, or you can email
Yeah.
me,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever.
Okay.
For the viewers at home who might be curious where you ended up on it.
Okay.
Um, so at the end, I always just ask people if they feel like it, if they have a question for me, or if questions, uh, you know, maybe not, but if you do, here's the opportunity. I know I just spent a whole ton of time asking you questions, so
Yeah.
any questions for me?
Um. What should I ask?
And if the answer is you're drawing a blank, then that's okay, no problem.
I'm like, well, I'm curious. Um, I don't want to ask like too lengthy of a question,
Oh, I don't
but
mind.
I'm curious what the process looked for you of typing yourself, especially like duration and like what that progression looked like.
Yeah, wow, that's a good question. Duration, like years. Um, it was part of a larger process that I was undergoing of understanding myself. So it wasn't just, it was because at the end of my 20s, I got divorced. I had been married for 5 years, had a couple of kids. So I underwent a number of huge changes, and also kind of had to reevaluate my views on the universe and things, because I was indoctrinated by a fundamental Christian pastor, Baptist pastor. So
Same.
yeah, yeah, you do strike me as a PK, perhaps, or somebody who's been through that. Um, and I don't know what that vibe is, right? What is that vibe that certain people give off? Maybe it's the preciseness of speech, or something like that.
Yep.
Maybe.
Yep.
Um, so, um, so I guess in I remember, like I said, I remember taking a typing test. It might have been like the 16 personalities or something like that, and getting ENFJ, and then just going, okay, that's cool. It was probably during a more social time in my life, actually. So I think, there was a time in my life, there was a period of my life where I was partying, where I was like doing things, very socially. But and it's funny because it I never really thought of myself. I actually considered myself an ambivert, like in between introvert extrovert, at that
Yeah.
time. Um, and for the better part of my life, I think I probably would have considered myself that. Uh, but I was also raised in a very social environment where I was forced to be social from the ground up. So I wonder if that had anything to do with it. I've also taken speech classes and things like that. Um, so I've had. Anyways, I'm getting around about. You're right. It is a long question, but it's fine.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening was, it had been a number of years since I had taken one of these typology tests, like 4 years or something. It was like my mid 30s, I think, almost 40 now, and uh, I took it. I got INFJ, and then I started reading. Like I said, I started reading the description. It was eerily familiar, And that moment was when I started to take it more seriously, because I was like, it wasn't it wasn't familiar in the way that I can see right through astrology when I read that. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's like, you will have a wonderful day today, bright things will happen and you will find success, and it's like, but the description of the INFJ is talking about internal world. It's like talking about your thought processes and stuff like that. I'm like, oh shit, this is really weird. This thing that I'm reading is talking about the way that I think in ways that I've never thought of it like that before, but it makes total sense. So that started me down the road of like trying to. So I really, something you said that I agree with and resonate with is sort of plundering fields of study and then just getting about 90% of it and then going, yep, okay, cool, move on to the next one, and then I'll just keep up with the other 10% like as I have time. But I'm just sort of moving my way around to all different like bodies of knowledge. So I looked at this cognitive function stuff and I said, okay, I don't understand it. I know it's going to take me a long time to understand it. So
Yeah.
what I decided to do was just take it a little bit at a time, just read a little bit at a time, acknowledge that I'm not going to understand it for a very long time, but say to myself, I want to try to understand this because it seems like a system that makes sense, but I just don't understand it. And worked my way through reading everything I could read on it, watching as many YouTube videos as I could watch about it. Um, even trying to read Carl Jung's work himself, and that is very hard to do, as I've
Yeah.
learned. But trying to read derivative works at least. Look at as many charts as I can because I'm a designer and I can look at charts and understand charts. Um, and slowly over time, it was like I saw the light little by little, and I started to understand. And what I did was, I typed everybody. I typed all the people in my life in my head. Like I
Yeah.
did talk to them about it, but like sometimes, but most of it was just in my head, and really tried to ask myself, because you know, like logic's weird because it's all made up, but like there's something to like spectrum somehow. It's sort of like this is not that, or this is different than that, and there's some space between them. And so if you can kind of try to identify those things where this is this and that is that, and they're on this spectrum and there's this distance between them, and then you can observe other people's behavior and try to figure out where they fall on that spectrum, then and you follow that process of elimination, you can start to find those trends, and then it starts to make sense, and then you lock down somebody's type and you're like, I'm positive they're that type. And then you think about them and you think about other interactions you've had with them or how they talk about things or whatever, and then the next person you meet, that's just one more person that you know about when you're thinking about what type they are. So you're taking all that information that you learned from that person and many other people, and you're seeing, okay, now where does this person fall on the spectrum? So, oh shit, there goes my. Anyways, um, so long story short, at one point I wasn't sure necessarily if I was an INFJ, and I thought maybe I could be an ENFP, but that was a very short exploration because I was
Mhm.
open-minded to it, I was open to the idea, but then as I looked into it, I was just like, no, 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 yeah, okay, never mind, and I don't remember exactly what it was that made me realize, but I think eventually, ultimately, now if I had to say, okay, why am I so sure, you know, everything, I think it really does come down to understanding introverted intuition, because it's a very uh well, once you can understand the difference between introverted intuition and extroverted intuition, you can see it in other people, um and you can see it in, like, I've been able to observe it myself in myself, you know what I mean, and that's not something I would ever have seen any of the people who use extroverted intuition do,
Yeah.
because they're interacting, they're interfacing with externally interfacing kind of, and I can like observe my own intuitions kind of, as weird as that sounds. So I think that was kind of how I was able to reach some level of conclusiveness on it. Um, because the thing that kept throwing me off is that I talk a lot, but I don't. But that's just what my dad told me, and my dad was an ISTJ. You know what I mean? So do I really talk a lot? Maybe not. I just think that maybe there's cases when I'm talking to people, I talk a lot, but
Yeah.
but generally I don't talk a lot. So it's hard. It was just hard. That was one of the things that was hard for me to. That kept throwing me off the trail, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's hard for me to go, yeah, I'm an INFJ, but I also talk a lot. You know what I mean? Because that's not stereotypical by any stretch. But the reality is, it does work. It does, because INFJs do interface with people a lot. It's just
Yeah.
very selective, and you know, it's very intentional, and it's very meaningful and very
Yeah.
intense. But so when I am talking to somebody, they have all of my attention, and it's very intentional, and every word matters. And I might say a lot of things too. So you know that's there's the long story, I guess. I don't know. I hope that was
It's a
interesting.
good story.
Whatever, you tell
Yes,
me.
it was very interesting. No,
Okay.
I can relate to so much of it, which may also be. It appears that we have some kind of common ground. So that's cool. Language is very cool. Um, I can definitely. So I had an old roommate who was definitely ENFP. So I always knew I wasn't that because he's just out there
Hmm.
always.
Hmm.
Um, but because this person had told me I was ENTP, I think I was trying to feed you that to see if there was ground to it. Um, so I think I have more. Um, I think I probably need to give it time. I think I'll probably end up relating to your experience of taking some time to figure it out, which is
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah, it's
It'll be
totally
good.
okay. And I actually watch a video, 2 videos back, I think, or 3 videos back, on my channel, of me with an ENTP, and
Okay.
ask yourself if you're like her, because I don't think you're like her.
Okay.
Just throwing that out there. But if
Yeah.
you want to compare yourself to someone I think is an ENTP, um, then go for it. But I will
Okay.
say ENTPs are instigative talkers by far. Like they have a lot of ideas, and they have a lot of things to say.
Yeah.
And it's not that ENFJs don't, or that even that INFJs don't. Like I just said, I do a lot of talking too. Um, yeah, I guess you just have to see. I guess you'll just have to look at it. I don't know. Don't know how
Yeah.
to describe it, but
I've definitely been able to rule out ENTP over the course of this conversation,
okay.
um,
All right.
but it's still between. Well, yeah. I mean, you kind of laid that out. But,
Yeah. So I think we've milked it dry, right?
yeah.
But you'll have to let me know in the comments, or over email, if you reach any kind of conclusiveness, because I will be interested to know. Um, but cool. Yeah. Any other thoughts, or what do you think? Should we hit the end of the video now, or what do you think?
Um,
If you have any other thoughts
Gosh,
or questions, you can ask them. That's fine.
I think this was really great. I would be extremely tempted to ask you about being a PK. I'm an
Oh,
MK,
sure. Okay.
but
All
I I,
right. You're
I
an
worry
MK.
I worry that would be a
That's
very long
missionary. That's missionary
conversation.
kid, by the way, for those playing at home. Go ahead. You can ask me a question about that if you want.
Um, are you okay? That's my
Am I
question.
okay? I am
Yeah.
now. It took a
Okay.
long time. Is that really what your question was?
I don't know. Maybe. Um,
It took a long time to be okay, if that's what you're wondering. But yes, I'm okay
yeah,
now.
that's okay. That's good. That's good. Um,
Most of my life. It took most of my life to be okay.
so you said that you you had the experience of encountering a lot of different ideas. You potentially like moved away from a framework which you had been given. Like, are there any ideas that since that process you felt like are more valid, or like what? Yeah, what did it lead you to? If you're comfortable sharing that, if you're not, that's very understandable.
No, sure. I like the idea. There's this concept called possibilianism. I don't know if you're familiar with that. You are familiar with that, or you're
No,
just
I'm
nodding?
nodding as in like
Oh,
I'm listening.
uh,
Sorry, I just do that.
no, it's okay. So, it's sort of like, well, here's Judeo-Christianity, and here's Islam, and here's atheism, and here's agnosticism, and here's Buddhism. But like, those are just a few points on a infinite number of possible explanations, right? And even a show that only geniuses watch, Rick and Morty, has explored many other kinds of ideas. But I think about it. I think there's some unusual properties of our universe that can be observed even just through logic, like random things just don't appear out of nowhere and disrupt. Like, that there's this concept of decoherence in quantum physics, where it's like, how long or how stable a superposition. I don't know if it's a superposition or whatever, but it's the quantum entanglement. I think that's what it is. Um, I ain't no quantum physicist, but I do try to read up on it. Um, we live in a coherent universe, unusually, uh, and so yeah, I do think about what the universe is. Um, I've thought about how if the universe, how much easier it would be to process everything in the universe if it was only from the perspective of one inhabitant of the universe versus the entire universe having to be created. um, which would lend credence to the idea that maybe I'm the only one, or that you're the only one, perhaps. But anyways, uh, I also was intrigued by the Black Mirror episode where the two people live for a long period of time as part of a simulation, and they're just part of a dating app at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think I saw
So
that one.
yeah, so um, I think that well, the thing that shook me off the fundamental Christianity horse was Andromeda. Strangely enough, it was Andromeda that did it after all. It was the realization that Andromeda is like 2 point something million light years away from the Earth, and that doesn't fit literally any of the young Earth creationist um, points of view. Uh, and then further learning, about 13.8 billion light years away being the edge of the universe that we can see, anyways. Um, just just kind of obliterating. I mean, we have we have unfrozen worms that are older than the Bible says that the universe is. I mean, the other thing that did it for me was the genealogies. Believe it or not, it was the genealogies in Andromeda that did it. The
Yeah,
genealogies say that the universe from Adam to Jesus is 4,000 years, and that we're 2,000 years since then, 6,000 years. So if you it's sort of I sleuthed it out, kind of. I wasn't content by just listening to the word of some person that it's true or it's not true. I really felt like I had to logic it out myself. And the genealogies in Andromeda was a contradiction that I found irreconcilable. I felt like every other every other contradiction I could find, there was some kind of rationale for it or argument for, this Bible contradiction or that. Things you can't see, like what angels look like and all this stuff, can't be proven or disproven. But the distance to Andromeda can be proven, and the genealogies in the Bible are very clear because they establish a lineage from Adam to Jesus. So it's important to the Jews to explain the lineage and get it right, and important to Christians that the lineage be right because Jesus had to be the son of Adam. So it's in their best interest that those names be all right. It's only 2,000 years of lineage, or 4,000 years of lineage, sorry.
Yeah.
So that was what I needed to be able to get away from it fully. Because if I could invalidate its most fundamental truth, then I could invalidate anything else easily. And that was the hardest thing for me, is because I see everything so systemically. I had to evaluate an entire body of knowledge that I have, and that was a laborious process. Because I've read the Bible through a few times, I've been taught through decades of Bible teaching, went to a Christian college, and have been also just went to a lot of church after that too. So I'm as indoctrinated as you can possibly be, all the way up, filled all the way to the top, and that was hard to deconstruct without a great deal of mental energy. And I can understand why people have such a hard time getting out of it, because so many, it's like fan fiction. It's like such an elaborate fan fiction has been written about everything. It explains everything, that there's an answer to every difficult question you could possibly conceive of, and the only way out is to learn enough science and to learn enough Bible. Learn enough Bible, learn enough science, you can get out of it. So that's my story.
It's a good story. Thank you for sharing it. I like, yeah, it was really good.
Well, thanks for asking the question.
Yeah, of course. I was very worried that, like everyone gets their say in, how they're going to tell their story and like what's going to be off limits or not. I have, friends from growing up who are on like every possible end of the spectrum. So, it's always you want them to be happy and fulfilled.
Right. Okay, well, I feel like we could go on all night about this.
Yes.
We're already at
Yeah.
the almost to the hour mark on part 2, so I'm going to end it for the video. Thanks for joining us, friends at home. Thanks for joining, Zoe. Appreciate your time
Yeah. Thank you.
and talking about yourself. I hope it's been a learning experience for everyone watching, and for me, it has been for me, as always. Yeah, so we'll stay in touch, and feel free to leave a comment, like I said, in the YouTube comments. And if you enjoyed the video, please do the subscribe thing. I have to say all the YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe, do the YouTube stuff, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.